Alright, fuckers, what's up? So, recently, during my free time when I wasn't doing anything, I've been rewatching a little bit of old ECW pay per views on DVD, including documentaries like The Rise and Fall of ECW. And I've just been saying to myself, man, what a really cool and a badass promotion ECW was. This was like the only indie promotion I've ever gotten into alongside old TNA, but I loved ECW. Not that shitty watered down version from 2006, but I'm talking about the original, the real ECW. And it's just a real shame, even to this day, that they went bankrupt. Because when you think about it, ECW never got stale, unlike WCW. Fans just couldn't get enough of it. So what happened? What could have been done to save the original ECW? But first, let me get this out of the way. For those saying that there was no way ECW could have been saved because of all the hardcore violence, the fanbase being too niche, and it offending a lot of people, you need to shut the fuck up because you don't know shit. So stop sounding more retarded than you already are. ECW didn't die because it was too extreme. Because if that were the case, then the Attitude Era would have died compared to WCW. Because of ECW's influence, WWF was getting monster ratings. And CZW still wouldn't be alive 20 years later. Because hardcore wrestling did appeal to a larger audience than most people think. Again, why do you think the Attitude Era got the ratings it did? Like, I know real cool friends who haven't watched wrestling in years who still talk about the classic TLC matches and the Undertaker and Mankind Hell in a Cell match. People used to pop for crazy chair shots and other spots. Hell, even the grungy feel and the lower production cost made ECW feel very undergroundish. You see, it wasn't just the hardcore violence that made ECW a success. It was also cool characters like Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, Shane Douglas, Sabu, Taz, Raven, RVD, Rhino, Mike Awesome, and many more. And really cool storylines like lesbian storylines. But no, people continue to say that ECW failed because it was too violent. I mean, give me a break. Like, this is mostly coming from people who have only heard of ECW but have never saw much of it. I mean, come on, guys, it wasn't really that bad. Compared to what they were doing in Japan, ECW might as well be WCW Saturday Night. Even before the occasional TNN deal, besides the occasional Sabu match, nobody was getting killed at ECW events. And I wish I could say the same thing about WWF. And that's one thing that people actually forget about ECW. It was as fake as any other wrestling promotion. From what I can recall, none of the guys were seriously injured or in danger of losing their lives. So I don't see what was so violent about it. You want violence? Then go watch real MMA fighting, where the competitors' lives are legitimately on the line and at the risk of a serious injury for real. At the end of the day, wrestling is fake. So don't listen to any of those idiots out there that believe ECW died because of that, and think that boring technical wrestling would have saved ECW. Because I can guarantee you that anybody who believes that is a complete moron. So don't listen to them because they're full of shit. The real reason ECW died was because not only was Paul Heyman a bad businessman, they were also kicked off of TNN after putting all their money into that deal because they wanted to be on mainstream television, especially with Raw coming to TNN in 2000. So once ECW were kicked off, they were pretty much screwed because they couldn't find another network, and thus pay-per-view companies felt like they could take advantage and not pay Paul Heyman the money they owed him, which led to them going out of business. So with the benefit of hindsight, was there any way of keeping ECW alive? To me, it seems like there was then more than meets the eye when it came to them going out of business. Now, going back though and watching some of their events from 1999 to 2001, and noticing that a large, rapid crowd that ECW drew, even when they folded, they clearly outgrown the ECW arena by 1999, and they really started to draw some of the same crowds, the same as Raw during 93 to 97, which is pretty impressive for an indie company. And that's more than I can say for other companies, TNA. With such a loyal diehard fan base, which was growing, how are they not making any money? Surely Paul Heyman would have done something to keep the performers' salaries down, while also keeping the company profitable. It doesn't really seem to add up when you think about it. ECW had money coming from pay-per-view, live events, merchandise, and on the top of that, you had performers' checks bouncing. So if wrestlers weren't getting paid, where were all the ECW profits going? It just doesn't make any sense of as to why Paulie couldn't pay his wrestlers on time. So here are some realistic moves that Paul Heyman could have done to ensure ECW survival. And yeah, there was a chance they could have survived. Because all ECW needed to do was survive 2001 and 2002. By then, there would be no more WCW. And by later on in the decade, they would have been a household name, with years of pay-per-view history and a better chance of success. Zuffa had lost money in their UFC investment by 2003 and 2004, and considering selling the company before they finally got the Spike TV deal in 2004, and it was an awkward period that they needed to survive in order to thrive. I believe similar moves could have been made with ECW, and ECW would be in a similar position at that moment. Again, I disagree with people saying that nothing could have been done to save ECW. Someone with funds could have came along and bought the company and invested some money into keeping it going, kind of like how Zuffa did for UFC in 2001. The UFC was in a very similar situation as ECW around 1999 to 2000. In fact, they were in worse shape than ECW was in at that exact same time. ECW was doing bigger pay-per-view numbers because of their TNN TV time. Someone took over UFC, made smart moves and wise investments, but at the same time kept the original spirit of UFC intact. And in doing so, they kept the small diehard original fanbase and grew upon it. UFC slowly kept growing until they finally surpassed WWE in pay-per-view revenues. They never toned down the violence, which plays a huge part of why they're more successful than WWE today. This little company was too violent for TV, and on its last leg in 2001 eventually grew, and took over a lot of WWE's pay-per-view market share. ECW had potential to do the same thing. People don't realize how far gone UFC was by late 2000. Like, it was seriously dead. Now look at it. UFC is huge. The only way ECW could have been saved was with a Zuffa/UFC type of buyout. Someone was a big fan of the company with a bunch of money needed to buy them out. Whoever bought them out would have needed Paul Heyman to keep the ECW style. And I also think if Paul Heyman made some cuts and kept the company's expenses down to survive 2001 and 2002, ECW could have taken off by 2003 and 2004 with a whole new generation of homegrown talent. Just to think about it, they could have gotten guys like CM Punk or Jon Moxley, and Jon Moxley would sure as hell be the next Brian Pillman with ECW still around. ECW was ahead of its time, and if they could have made it to 2005, they could have been a clear number 2 promotion. And yes, even bigger than TNA. Who knows, maybe even become a threat to WWE as number 1. Spike TV would have been all over ECW in 2005, and they probably would have had the freedom to refrain from watering down their product the way they had with TNN in 1999. But ECW would have not been able to survive with Paul Heyman in charge of everything. It had to have been someone with a lot of money to buy ECW, like Billy Corgan, who was in talks of buying 10% of the company, Shane McMahon, who almost bought the company in 2000, or even Disney, who was really close to buying the company. Yeah, believe it or not, Disney was actually close to buying ECW. Paulie said it himself, and he wouldn't be bullshitting you. And before you assume that we were gonna see shit like RVD versus Mickey Mouse, it would not be like that. Because this wouldn't be Disney buying ECW. This would be a pay-per-view distributor owned by Disney buying ECW. And they were this close, but some asshole vice chairman said no because it was too non-Disney. And it's a real shame though, but what can you do? But anyways, that's all I have for this video. Give me your thoughts down below on what you think, and later.